Yeah, so the seventh community dialogue that we are having on Zoom, and following the last webinar, as Joe said, that is about collaborating across an entire continent. We thought that it was time to start a discussion about how we can to be able to eventually become active on our bioregions and contribute to starting these learning centers. And so how can these huge online membership that gather around Joe and his book and the webcast can turn into working groups and a community. I'm gonna share, as usual, my slides here, which makes it easier. So that's the topic of today's discussion, and it comes after Saturday's webinar, which was huge, about how can we do regenerative work at the scale of an entire continent. And the proposal is, and the we can do it if we organize around bioregional networks. So this is where we are now as a community. We are 1,600 members strong. There's a book that Joe decided to publish, like in the Commons. Everyone can read it on the website of our dear Regenerator study groups, that designed the pathway for regenerative work at the planetary scale. Then we have a website, a community website, where we have, most of us, I believe, our profiles, and we can share comments and share resources. We have had so far 12 webinars and also 7 Zoom community dialogues. So that's what we have, where we start. And where we have to go is the scale to get to that level of being able to think and act at the level of regenerating a continent. So this is why we are starting a design process to explore how all of us together can create the support tools we will need to do this ambitious work. And so this is the basically design process that we are starting today. I mean, part of it has already started on the website with question, comments, and proposals, but we are going to be more intentional about how can we organize ourselves, what do we need to start thinking, approaching this work we have to do. So today's agenda is structured slightly different from previous ones. So we will only have 2 breakout groups. There will be one after this presentation that I'm giving. Then Joe will introduce another topic, and we will have a second breakout group, and then a final main session discussion. But also we will have people, volunteer facilitators, report back after each breakout group for a main session sharing. So it's slightly different than what we did before. So how can we turn online membership, 1,600 members that are joined online, how can we turn that into bioregional working groups? And how can we really create a community of regenerators? And so what we thought with Joe is that in order to do that, we need some people that are willing to help the process. So facilitators, organizers, we call them, that can support members, facilitate working groups, the building up of working groups and their working, stimulate engagement in members, bridge between different discussions that go on in the working groups and on the website, and also hold accountability in respect of what people say that they want to do, etc. So I presented myself in the first of this series of community dialogue. As a profession, I am a community organizer, and I've been trained by the Industrial Areas Foundation, that is an organization that is based in the United States, that was created by Saul Alinsky. And in this tradition, there's a separation between the role of the organizer, the community organizer, and leadership and leaders. So they do slightly different roles. And the community organizing job is to create the condition by which leaders can step forward and collaborate together on a larger scale. So what we like to do is to start a learning process, a training, probably after summer, to form a first cohort of community regenerators. So people of this community want to help this process by volunteering some of their time and first of all engaging in a shared learning process to see how we can really support this community to do the job that is needed. So we are asking for community input to design this process and the training. So before I go to the first round question, I want to share here on the chat a first tool, and I see also Roberta is sharing a proposal. So this is a Google document that everyone can edit, like Vivek usually does during the webcast. We've been inspired by what he has been doing all this time. And so because we will ask for volunteer note takers during the breakout groups, so that's a place where people can write their notes. And this document will be open and will stay open for the future also, so everybody can add ideas, and it's our first very rough tool for starting this design process, and I wanted to share it. So the first round question is about the process that I just outlined, and is what in your, in your perspective, would these facilitators need to do to really help develop members and strengthen community and collaboration in the study group? And I'm gonna post the question also in the chat. And this is the first breakout group question, where we invite people to share their ideas, and also we'll ask for a volunteer facilitator. So each breakout group will decide who will do this volunteering facilitation, and then the facilitator will share first about the question, and she will keep the time to ensure that everybody speaks the same, and also he or she will take notes on that shared Google document, and then briefly reports back in the main session. And if, any question before we start the breakout group?
If it's okay, Diego, I'd just like to add something here, that what we're really talking about doing is beginning a conversation about how to create what we talked about in the pro-social framework and some other parts of the study group, which is that there are facilitated ways of creating effective groups. And so this is the kind of capacity that we feel is needed. We already have a focused group on the Earth Regeneration Fund and another group on regenerative parenting. But there's been a lot of expressed interest in other groups being formed, as well as creating bioregionally focused groups all around the world. So we're talking about building these capacities for groups like those. So if you're imagining what kinds of facilitation, it's for creating thematic focus groups and working groups.
So the breakout groups will only last 15 minutes and will be of groups of 3. So each one will have more or less 5 minutes to share and speak about the question that I posted on the chat. There are 2 people that are joining us by phone. I just want to make sure that they can take part to the breakout group. They already done it on Zoom.
I'm the same person who's also on the phone, 3428. So that's just my backup in case my Zoom drops. So I'm one of those people.
Thanks for telling me, so I can move. So it's the 428, the one that ends with 428. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's another number that ends.
Yes.
With,
Hello. I don't have a speaker on my new computer. So in order to hear you, I'm on the phone. 9191 is my phone number.
Perfect.
This is Gail.
You will be able to join, right?
Yes.
Okay. By phone. Okay.
Thanks, Diego. Thank you.
You're welcome. And yeah, so there will be a group with just 2 people. And I guess this is okay. Okay, so, or maybe I can move. Actually, I'm gonna move these 2 people to another breakout. Okay, and okay, so can you tell me again your name? 428, sorry. The phone number, yeah, Mary, right?
Yeah, Mary, yes.
Yeah. So I'm gonna move that number in the same, thanks Mary, in the same room where you stay, which is number 4. Okay, so in a few seconds you will be moved to the breakout rooms, and after 15 minutes there will be a notice about 1 minute left, and then you will be automatically returned to the main session. See you soon. Michelle, can you hear me? Hi, Michelle. Can you hear me? Michele, Michelle? Hello? So, welcome back. And I think contrary to what I said before, I think it would be better if we go straight to the second question, and then we'll ask the facilitators to report both questions in the last final session. Otherwise, I am afraid we will run late. If that's okay with you, Joe. Okay. So yeah, next part will be introduced by Joe, and there's another question that you will introduce too.
Yeah, thank you, Diego. What I want to sort of talk about for just 2 or 3 minutes is what we discussed in the webinar on regenerating a landscape. Which is just the example of what is in creating a bioregional regeneration, and that there's going to be an element of people learn how to do it, of helping to coordinate between different projects. So here in Barichara, for example, we have the need to recharge and refill aquifers, to do reforestation, specific areas where we have to work with different landowners to create a framework of cooperation, because if we can reforest their land, we would change the weather patterns and bring more fog and clouds to the landscape where it would store water. And then there are various local organizing efforts among networks of farmers to bring solidarity, food, and resilience to the food system here. So we have these various different pieces, and what we want to see happen through the study group, or what's I think being called forth by a lot of people, is to cultivate a similarly kind of complex landscape of action in their own spaces. The members of the study group are coming here either because they're already involved in fairly complex projects and they want to find peers to be able to share with, or they would like to get involved in increasingly complex projects, but they don't really know how to, and they don't know where to go to join them. And so one thing the study group could do that these facilitators and organizers can support is streamlining processes, helping people to have kind of quicker scaffolding and support to build their own bioregional projects or to join a bioregional project. And an example that I thought of for the Barichara bioregion where we are is, as I've been writing descriptions, and you can see them in the Earth Regeneration Fund working group that's in the larger study group, there's a subgroup. I wrote a description of the Barichara region that outlines the major areas of work we're doing. So a thought that we have, and Alejandra Zagal, who's on this call today, has been talking with something similar, is creating like a template information layout for describing bioregions, bioregional projects, which could involve a layered spatial mapping and social system mapping, so that we would create a process to create a kind of clarity of what each bioregion, how each bioregion is being approached to regenerate it. So a person might find that they want to go and visit a specific bioregion by scanning these summaries. And each summary includes ways to get involved. Like there might be training programs or permaculture camps or an upcoming ecosystem restoration camp, whatever the local region happens to be offering would be included in this, something like a template of information. So we're also thinking about this architectural design of information as a type of organizing. So as we talk about cultivating education of facilitators and organizers, we're also thinking about recruiting design capacities for the study group to become more powerfully structured over time. And so as we enter into the second round of conversation today, I'd like to invite you to think about both what does it mean to organize your own bioregion, or if you're not part of one and you're not sure where you would want to go, what kind of facilitation would help you to find your way, so that these trainings and cultivation of leadership and organizing in the network can support as many people as possible to become regenerators of the earth. And so that's what I wanted to kind of share as just a little bit more of the context of the kinds of activities we would like to organize using the study group to leverage it, because the study group is intentionally not an organization and does not compete with organizations and does not raise funds to do programs in a way an organization does. Although we might create community currencies and have various ways that we crowd fund projects and other things that collectively we might decide to do later, But if so, that it won't work like an organization, it will work more like a commons. And so we're inviting this co-creation of the commons and its different capabilities as a way of being anti-organization in a sense, at least kind of typical NGO organizing. And so that's what I wanted to share before we go into the next question and the next breakout. Diego, is there anything else you'd like me to clarify before we do?
Just the question that we thought of together, which I'm gonna post on the chat, which is easier. So which is how can members in the study group be enabled to help, sorry, I didn't word it right, to help make this happen in their bioregions. Oh no, and help make this happen into their bioregions. So it's about basically how this study group can be helped and enabled to do what Joe just said in where we live in our bioregions. So that's the second piece of the discussion. The first one was about these facilitators' role that we are envisioning, while this one is more about how can the whole study group can organize to help each of us do this work in our bioregions. And any question?
Thank you, Diego. That helps a lot for me. I'm looking forward to the next breakouts. So if there are no questions, let's go for it, shall we?
Okay, see you soon.
Thank you, Diego.
I see that we have already 5 pages on our Google document filled up, which is really good. And so now the first thing I would like to do is asking the facilitators to offer a summary of what was discussed in their groups on both questions in like about 3 minutes, if possible, and then we'll move to a more general discussion between us until we still have an hour. So actually no pressure, even 5 minutes for reporting back about the breakout groups. And whoever wants to start, they can just unmute themselves. So otherwise I can ask, because I see that there is breakout group 1 with Gali, Mike Baker, Joe, and Anna Mines. I don't know who was the facilitator.
I think Anna may be taking some, writing down some notes now.
Are you ready?
Anna, do you mind sharing for us?
Yeah, I can share the notes, a brief summary of our
Do you need more time?
Sorry?
Do you need more time?
No, I've handwritten. I was just transferring it over to the document. In our first round, there was a story from Gail about her experience in building community in her geographic area and how important it was for to talk our way into intimacy first in order to build, I suppose, rapport with one another. But then that most of the time spent in that first round was talking about the difference between community organizing, facilitation, and network weaving. And so in particular, I suppose that this group is looking for community organizers. Joe put it nicely saying, these are people who understand the art of dinner party hosting. It's a little bit more than a Facebook moderator, but it's not quite a network weaver yet anyways. And I mentioned that it would be helpful for these facilitators to help connect people who, are asking that question, how can I help, to those who are looking for people to contribute certain skills, or just whether that's virtually or not. So clarifying that this facilitator isn't just organizing virtual necessary connections, but also obviously geographic, because we are talking about bioregions. And round 2, we spent some time talking about how essential a map would be, and how providing different layers to those maps could be things that people contribute to, and maybe a facilitator would encourage people to do that. Keeping in mind that, there's not going to always be information, the data won't always be there unless we're talking about areas that have really solid mapping already in place, maybe for good or bad reasons. Joe was referring to how in his region, because of extractive practices in mining, there are those maps available. And I was thinking about how those, contributing to these maps could also be, we have to be extra careful of our biases and what is going to be added to those maps. Where information isn't necessarily available, we might be leaving out certain groups of people who aren't represented in this community. So just having a place to start so we can build on that would be helpful. And also, let's see, a map to identify the more strategic interventions that we can do would be essential, so that we're not wasting our time. And then kind of concluded that discussion talking about how, connecting to one another with people in our bioregions, using, a facilitator or community organizer is especially helpful for those of us. It's helpful for everyone, but especially for those who live in urban areas where the cultural scaffolding might be a little bit more rigid, in regards to, like, relative to the policy in Barichara, where you're able to, because it's not enforced, you're able to make some changes. If you live in Chicago instead, you might not be able to make, those changes because those certain policies are enforced, and it requires more community effort and being able to connect with one another to feel like we're, not alone in this.
Thank you, Anna. So the second group had Chad, Federico, and Alejandro as members. And if the facilitator is ready.
Yes, hi. So I'm Chad, I was the facilitator. And we had a really good conversation, Federico and Alejandro. And noticed some overlap with what Anna was just talking about regarding the power of maps. So we ended up talking a lot about mapping. So Alejandro is already working with the study group to produce open source layers of bioregions. And we really went on to talk about different tools for facilitating mapping and the things that could help us achieve. So one thing that occurred to me actually is that the power of maps is really significant in terms of forging a shared identity and a shared story. So even if you look back to the rise of modern nations, the nation state actually grew as something in people's consciousness through maps. So it wasn't just a tool for administration, but a tool for creating shared identity. So more and more accessible bioregional maps could help us do the same thing. And we're talking then about how facilitators can use maps to help draw connections between people and resources and communities. And that's actually what maps themselves are really good at. That's what they're good at, because they can layer information, collect different things in one place, and then help you visualize and see the connections. So that's similar to what the community organizer would be doing. So using that as a tool, but then also showing people how to access those tools themselves and to contribute to them. And that could include things like creating a resource for monitoring and understanding change within the bioregion, and should also keep an eye towards this triad of the virtual, the place, and the people, or the community, the technology, and the environment. So the organizer is sort of this intermediary, bridger between those three things. So even if they had a little bit of specialized knowledge or interdisciplinary understanding of those different things, that'd help them do their job even more effectively. I also mentioned, so mycelia. So this is built on a platform called Hilo, which eventually will be ported over to Holochain, which we, I think, talked about here at one point, which is distributed ledger technology for distributed internet. But right now that platform is, it'll get there, be ported over to Holochain at some point, but right now it's being developed through this, through a group called the Bionutrient Food Association and the Terran Collective. And the Terran Collective is actually one of the newest members of the Regenerative Communities Network in the Bay Area. So this new tool, one of the features is a mapping, a mapping platform. And it's cool for all sorts of reasons. And I'll stick a link in the chat for the webpage there. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see a demonstration that they had last week showing how the system works and what the mapping features are and so forth. And it's just exactly the sort of thing that we're talking about here that platform is trying to achieve. And we also talked about the importance of connectivity from the local to the regional and the global. And that was towards the end of the first part of the question, the first question on what community organizers can help do. And this, that idea of connectivity between different scales rolled into the second part. So we're talking about how facilitators aren't really ambassadors, but they're connecting local needs with global best practices and information and so forth. So what people could benefit from these sorts of networks would be access to knowledge or people in other bioregions that are similar in terms of their geographic context or their social situation, or with their neighbors, right? How forge communities among people of like-minded, like-minded people who might be living next door, who otherwise might be, hard to get in touch with. And we're also talking about the importance that, with all the sort of information, pollution out there and corporate interests, that in sort of scaling this out, it's also about doing it in sort of a trusted way, where it's not just about more information, but creating high quality personal connections and communal connections and connections between organizations. So even here in Michigan, there's plenty of environmental groups, but they're very sort of balkanized, they're very fragmented. And there could be a lot more work on bringing together organizations that are already in place to under sort of a bioregional understanding. And then, how also people could benefit from accessing pools of resources and identifying needs and offers and projects and events and that sort of thing. We also talked about the importance of social justice, and another tool that's worth checking out is called Public Lab, which is about using citizen science to identify things like toxic waste sites that might escape government data or not be included in corporate reports. So that's another really cool tool. And when it comes to social justice, also gathering and legitimating indigenous knowledge that's usually neglected, but also really essential to understanding place. And then I guess the last thing we were talking about was helping people understand the consequences of their actions, so using these networks to tie into existing, education programs or, school curricula to give people a bioregional understanding, but also more visceral understanding of how what they do matters. So, yeah, there we go.
Thank you, Chad. Yeah, very comprehensive. So next group was with Gail, Mary, and Bobby.
Hi, I'm Gail Colin. Okay, so we thought training was very important for this, although Bobby asked a question, which is who's going to facilitate the facilitators. So somebody up on top is going to, I guess, have to, maybe a small group or something can be in charge of getting that going. We talked about having an inventory of people's skills, experience, and what their interests are, as well as where they are. Would be important. Also time constraints, some people work, some don't, you know, that could affect who could be a facilitator. I mentioned that I've trained with the Climate Reality Project, which is Al Gore's group, and they're huge, and they've done a lot of organizing. Of course, they have resources we don't have, but looking at groups like that and how they've trained advocates and worked together in very, very large groups could be models for us as well. Also, there was a lot of discussion on looking at inner work, collective contemplative work, that's also really important, and it's something that facilitators would certainly need to be familiar with and perhaps do themselves before they can facilitate others. You know, working past your own trauma to be able to work with others, and you know, helping people to align with whatever their deepest values are. And then I also was in the second group, I was on the bottom here, I took some notes, which is, and where did my notes, oh, there they are. Okay. You know, connecting people according to their bioregion, being sure there are guidelines on how people work together as a group, whether it's facilitators or just the general membership. If you don't have guidelines and some kind of rules, all kinds of things can happen. And those of us who have done any kind of organizing or working in big groups know that that's an issue. And again, looking at other groups and using them as models, but also removing competition. As you know, a lot of nonprofits, it's very hard because you have to compete with other groups doing similar work to get funding, to get notice, and trying to get rid of that whole element. And also that no one group or one person has more on their plate that they can handle, whether it's a facilitator or an individual. You know, I personally I had to take time from my work to come here today, which is why this is my first time participating in one of these. I can't take an hour and a half or 2 hours every week to do something like this. So that also has to be taken into consideration. And Anita had spoken about double linking people between different aspects of the larger network. So people have a way to relate to others within the network that's not too overwhelming. I think those are like the main concepts for us.
Thank you, Gail. So next group is Tara, Stan, and PJ.
Hey, sorry about that. I was just trying to get my phone unmuted. So honestly, a lot of what has already been said, we talked about as well, especially from the mapping perspective. And the facilitators really just connecting and helping to encourage and pull out concrete actionable items from people who want to get involved. And both Stan and Tara mentioned, you know, it would be really crucial, I guess, for the facilitator to be able to direct and bring out, especially in the bioregional focused groups, bring out the work that needs to be done and really help connect those, especially newer people or people who want to learn more about their specific area, to really be able to direct and know the different places to direct people in terms of getting that really deep place-based education and information. And then in terms of the overall working group, well, the study group, we thought that if there was a way to, or if there were people currently who are able to go through, and I know we had one post on the study group about what everybody is interested in, but if there was a way to kind of go through and see, okay, who is located where, and who has skills in what, and who is interested in what, then you could start to, I guess, identify what like-minded or like-skilled people might be involved. Maybe there's a working group that could come out of that. And we saw that there's probably places for working groups in terms of like technical, skill-based stuff, like the mapping and you know, there's probably programming involved and like finance and investment and all of that different stuff. There's the technical knowledge that's needed. But then there should also be sort of larger or other groups where you have the bioregional focus. And then it would be sort of a nice synergy and a nice flow of information and connection between those where you can be like, hey, we need somebody who's really skilled in mapping to help us to map our bioregion. So you'd be able to sort of pull either somebody from there or just post in one of those technical groups and be like, hey, look, we're really looking for some help and guidance in this. And I think we also discussed just what everybody else has been saying about facilitators needing to be skilled in sort of pro-social process. We find that's probably going to be a really crucial element because there's going to be a lot of groups, a lot of individuals, even within the group, and we want to help maintain that coherence, you know, all the way down and all the way up the different scales. So we had a lot of different ideas about, you know, once in these individual groups, you know, for instance, like within a Cascadia bioregion group, Stan's got a ton of ideas of what are some good things to throw in there and get started on, which actually brought to light the fact that maybe we just need a place for people within these different bioregions to start to almost just dump information and ideas into, and then the facilitator or a couple other people could be involved in sort of sifting, organizing, and bringing those into coherent, actionable ideas, and maintaining a direction then, while looking at, you know, the blue marble as Joe's put before. So those were our ideas, nothing too new.
Thank you, PJ. And we have 3 other groups, and yeah, as PJ did, if something has already been said, I think it can be skipped, and then we will still have the Google document to check, you know, what everybody shared. So next one is Ellen Finuala, sorry about my pronunciation, and Simona.
Hi there. Finola had to go take care of her kids for a little bit, so I took over the facilitation, which I'm not natural at. So, but much of the same kinds of ideas. My emphasis tended to be on facilitation done well, needs to be welcoming and value each person, and without too much judgment, without a lot of pressure and responsibilities, to make a kind, healing kind of an environment that would welcome and create joy for people, that people would want to come together. So those are the conditions. And Simona was with us and mentioned that as somebody beginning in the field, although lots of background in other ways, that they would want to have a welcoming place where there was plenty of opportunity to have training, perhaps even be trained to become a facilitator. That might be important. And Fanula mentioned that Fanula is always been for 30 years the driver herself of community development and facilitation, is obviously really skilled at it. But there's a time to say, wait a minute, enough is enough, and maybe not do that role in order not to burn out. And I think we should respect that kind of healthy limit setting too. And that the need would be to network, to find people to link up with for mutual support and connection, and I like that. For the second question about how can members be involved and be enabled and help make the bioregional kind of community, all of us felt it was important to identify the piece of land or map and to learn a great deal about it. Fanula suggested everyone should start with at least one person, maybe two, and a little teeny piece of land, if it's your backyard or if it's a little space in front of a shopping center or whatever it is, just to get your hands in the land and learn about the four elements and just let that kind of growth help you learn how to become a steward. I like that. That was very neat. I found a couple of places near my home in Denver, not just my backyard, which I'm very much involved with now as a result of this group, but also a place that turned into a nature center 15 minutes away from me driving. And then there's a place in Colorado, the state in which I live, that's a savory hub. And so I may want to just devote myself to some way of supporting that without any expertise. But all of us felt the map so that we can look at a map and then have that map associated with what kinds of needs do they have, what kinds of skills do they need, what kinds of people are there, and a way to cross-reference. So how do I look up the person who's, also in Denver or something like that? Streamlining, finding resources, because some of us are quite new to this, feeling a little bit adrift, but very much wanting to help out in some way. And a facilitator could assist with suggestions in order for all of us to become more literate about it and start with some nuts and bolts kind of specifics, as Simona was suggesting. And I think I'll wrap that up at this point, unless Fanula or Simona has anything to add.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. And next group is Roberta, Anita, and Vivek.
I believe we had two groups, and I think Gail had already covered the second group, so I'll be fairly quick. I know, so we were talking in terms of two contexts. One is kind of more of the specific to the Earth Regenerators website, and then the real part that we want to get to is the facilitation of bioregional groups. And Anita really touched on something, which is kind of what is the role of a facilitator? What is the meaning of a facilitator? And I think there's kind of this step back to, facilitators really understanding what is how do they follow the pro-social framework that's been talked about by Joe before, and I think Anita is very familiar with it, but I want to at least have a better awareness of it. I know that's a blind spot in me. And then there's this other connection between diverse and complementary skills for collaboration. So within a subgroup, identifying those, the diversity of skill sets and what's complementary and, what's needed within a group. And then I believe Anita derived this from sociocracy, which is this concept around having, short-term groups, these pairings of maybe only two people, and that contribute to a larger group. And you have short-term groups contributing to the large groups, but then you also have this other frame of long-lasting groups. So I'm just kind of trying to hold those concepts in mind at the moment. So, yeah, and then maybe finally there's just between bioregional groups, this ability to notify people, maybe that occurs within the website itself right now. Maybe there's facilitators that can just know a cohort or one set of people that, and they know their skills and say, oh, okay, I can point to this person because they're very knowledgeable about it. Yeah.
Thank you, Vivek. And last group is Paul, Diogo, and Chris.
Hello. We discussed about using biomimicry for coordination. So looking at incorporating our coordination with the seasons, perhaps like using like inspiration from pagan celebrations such as the solstices to tie in tradition to sort of like symbolically link the whole group together. And we also discussed about when coordinating, breaking up tasks into smaller pieces and giving the responsibilities to lots of people. And in that way, people each go on their own hero's journey and gain agency to sort of take on bigger and better tasks. And yeah, and we discussed a bit about introducing perhaps even like vlogging and stuff like that. And as sort of the mapping process is getting people in each of their regions to sort of show how the seasons change, how the weather changes, testimonials, like extracts, even if it's just text and so on, and sharing recipes. So, and whether there's a template that can be created around the exchange of recipes and sort of best practice using techniques such as diversify, select, amplify, and yeah, and then perhaps trying to link in local economies to enable more integration with people, or to enable people to feel like they can come to those areas a bit more.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I think it's been very useful and many inputs. The process that we were envisioning was building up a training for facilitators. So having group members that are willing to volunteer some of their time, take part to this first cohort of facilitators, and then there will be a training that will be partly there's, as people mentioned, pro-social framework that Joe and I think another member of the group can share. I can share about community organizing, what I learned about it, as it is my job, but also we will invite members that have something to share and teach others to do that. So it will be a self-learning process where we can share tools and also identify, a common common way of helping the community around the task that we identified. So this will probably start in September, but we want to use the month of July to launch web form to gather inputs from the community, both in terms of what is needed, what skills people are willing to share, and also to start identifying those volunteers that are willing to help facilitate this process. So in order to do that, we have set up a Google form that I'm going to share here. And we decided to first share it only to people that took part to this call. So you, I hope the link works. Something strange. Is it working? Yeah, okay. So we ask to fill it up and return it by Friday, so we can have a first idea together with the notes that were shared in the Google document about you know, this design process, for what was the input today and the ideas that came out, and so that we can refine this web form and launch it eventually to the whole community, to the 1,600 members, and start gathering inputs, data, volunteers. So this is what we were thinking about. I'll leave to Joe to add something up, and then I think we have our last few minutes if someone wants to add something. And we are also going to publish this video, this recording, together with an article that Joe is gonna write, so also you and other people can add more on the website about this conversation.
Yeah, I'm just sitting in this place of feeling like a sponge that's full, and then if you squeeze me, all of it would come out, because so many wonderful ideas have been said. And what I feel we are like dipping our toes into right now is the idea that there is some massive amount of work that needs to be done, this nesting upward and nesting downward of collaborations to restore health and stability to the Earth's biosphere and keep humans from going extinct. And what I feel in this small way of just focusing on what would it mean to create organizational capacity for the Earth Regenerators study group, because it's become something more than a study group, is I feel like there's another thing I should tell you all about, an intention that is pulling me from the future, like that I'm drawn into a way of taking actions toward the future because I'm helping facilitating something to emerge. And that is that this study group for me is part of creating a design school that would be physically based, and that people will be able to come to Bhatichara and help create a design school for Earth regeneration, using a lot of the thinking and the ideas we're developing and experimenting with in the study group. So there's a sense of creating something more than the online community that would at least have an anchor physically to where I'm located because of my role in creating the study group. And I feel that there will be parallel activities by others, like Paul, who's here on the call. I've just seen what you shared in the study group, that seems what you're doing in Patagonia has a similar potency to what we would be doing in Bhatichara. So I'm not meaning to say this will be the place that's the center of all of it, but that there will be a catalyzing model, if it works, to draw attention to the other places as well, and for us to weave with each other. So what I'm feeling is this sense that we will have some people in a study group that will take roles, sort of like what Diego is role modeling in his journey of going from an engaged member to an emergent leader to someone who's now creating a new pathway of development for the study group. That there will be other people who will step into these creative roles, and something really powerful and profound potentially could emerge. And we'll take great care not to let it fall into the trappings of NGOs. So we need to be very mindful about that. But as I see some people nodding there, it's like, yes, I've experienced with that. But I feel like what we're really talking about doing, we're talking about creating a collective intelligence pattern within this set of people in the study group. It's just a tiny, tiny microcosm of the regenerative movement and of the planetary system as a whole. And what we want to enable is coherence to the next elegant step, where it feels the next elegant step is give people a bunch of good ideas and information, and don't help them build the supports to put them into actions collectively with a bunch of frustrated, disempowered people. And so our sort of the responsibility of the first wave of success of this study group is now we have a deeper responsibility to actually make those meaningful transitions possible for people. initially those within the study group, but then beyond them as well. And so I see these facilitators playing roles that help to scaffold those transitions in the lives of our members, which includes us. And so there may be some people on this call today who end up in leadership roles where instead of having a profession in the normal sense, your work is doing this regenerative design work, which may be with what the study group becomes, or it may be somewhere else. But we just all know this is the work, is to regenerate the earth. So I'm really excited, and honestly, I feel humbled. I feel sort of like I'm in the face of, in the midst of so many capable and thoughtful people, that I feel the potency of what we might do if we just have good conversations. And in this last hour and a half, we've had some very good conversations. So, so I look forward to co-creating this design process with you. It's not simply that I've figured out how to design it. It's that we're creating prompts that give us feedbacks so we know how to design the next step. But increasingly that will include all of you as co-conspirators and co-creators in that design process. So just naming that is what I wanted to do now, and say that this little survey that Diego created, it won't take you very long to fill it out. And what we want to do is just start creating a pattern of intelligence aggregation, where we're not just collecting information, but we're creating intelligence. We're creating actionable pathways that are informed so that we can take better actions with each following step. And so we're going to stumble and be clumsy at times, sort of like, feeling around in the dark for where the light switch is. And other times we'll be very clear in what we're doing and know exactly how to do it. And you'll feel our clumsiness and you'll feel our competence at different times. And all of that is completely to be expected, since no one has ever done this before. So that's all I wanted to say for now. And pass it back to you, Diego.
Thank you, Joe. And I'm sorry I completely miscalculated time, so we don't actually have time for a general discussion. But we still have that Google document shared that every one of us can look at, and if there are questions or other thoughts beyond what was shared in the breakout groups can be put there. Meanwhile, I ask you to save either the chat or open the link of the web form, because once we close the Zoom call, you won't be able to access it anymore. And we want to reserve this just to the people that took part to the Zoom call until Friday. So if you can fill it up, and this is for sure a discussion that will go on for long, and for sure on the website and in the future Zoom call. So thank you all. Nice seeing you.
Yeah, one other thing really quickly. If anyone feels compelled to follow up directly with either Diego or myself, just feel welcome to, if you have thoughts, if you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning with an idea and need to share with someone, whatever it may be, we are here to role model facilitation until there are more facilitators that are sort of granted a sort of recognized role as facilitators in the group, because there are many facilitators, but I just wanted to say that as well. So so reach out to us using the Earth Regenerators study group and its messaging, or any other way that you have access to us if you'd like to talk further.
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge that Roberta already did that. She wrote a message to me, and she also shared something here in the chat, a document with a proposal. So thanks everybody, and see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.